The boy was drawing. That was the first thing Harrison Cross noticed. Not the dark hair that curled slightly at the temples, not the serious concentration on the small face, not the way the child sat with perfect posture on the leather bench in the Grand Meridian lobby. No, what stopped Harrison mid-stride, what made his Italian leather shoes halt on the marble floor of the hotel empire he'd spent 15 years building, was the simple act of a boy lost in his own world, pencil moving across paper with complete absorption. Something about it felt familiar, painfully so. Harrison had a meeting in 7 minutes. The international investors were waiting in the penthouse conference room, a $40 million deal on the table. His assistant was already texting him, the phone buzzing insistently in his pocket, but he couldn't move. His eyes dropped from the child's face to the floor beside the bench, and that's when the ground shifted beneath him. A small backpack, navy blue. The zipper pull was a little silver airplane. And there, written across the front pocket in permanent marker, in the careful handwriting of a child who had recently learned cursive, Ethan Cross. The name hit him like a physical blow. His last name, his family name, the name that graced the facades of 17 luxury hotels across 3 continents. The name that appeared in Forbes and Bloomberg and the financial pages of every major newspaper in the Western world. On a backpack belonging to a boy he had never seen before in his life. Harrison's hand shot out, gripping the nearest marble pillar. His knees had simply stopped working. Sound receded. The soft piano music piped through the lobby speakers, the murmur of guests checking in, the distant ring of crystal glasses from the bar. All of it faded to static. His heart was pounding so hard he could feel his pulse in his throat, in his temples, behind his eyes. How? The question tore through his mind. When? Who is his mother? And then, as if the universe had heard him and decided to answer with maximum cruelty, a woman rose from a chair nearby. She was holding a phone to her ear, nodding at something the person on the other end was saying. Her back was to him, but Harrison would have recognized the slope of those shoulders anywhere, the way she stood with her weight slightly on her left foot, the particular shade of chestnut in her hair, the way it fell past her shoulder blades. 9 years had passed, nearly a decade of building his empire, of becoming the man everyone expected him to be, of burying certain memories so deep he'd almost convinced himself they'd never happened. But the body remembers what the mind tries to forget. She turned toward her son, and Harrison saw her profile. Still beautiful, more beautiful actually. The softness of her 20s had given way to something stronger, more defined. She was saying something to the boy, gesturing toward the elevator bank. In a moment, she would turn fully. In a moment, she would see him. Vivian, the only woman who had ever made him feel like a person instead of a performance. The only one who had looked at him and seen something other than the Cross family fortune. The woman he had let go. The woman who had, apparently, left carrying far more than he ever knew. Welcome back to the Golden Stories fireside, dear listeners. Before we unravel how Harrison Cross ended up frozen in his own lobby, staring at a son he never knew existed, let me ask, where are you joining us from tonight? Drop your city in the comments below. And if you're new here, that subscribe button is waiting to welcome you to the family. Now, have you ever discovered something that rewrote your entire history? One piece of information that made you question everything you thought you knew about your own life? Harrison Cross was about to learn that the woman he let go 9 years ago didn't leave empty-handed. She left with a secret, a living, breathing secret, who was now sitting in his hotel lobby, drawing in a sketchbook, completely unaware that his father was standing 20 feet away, watching his entire understanding of reality crumble to dust. But here's the question that kept me up at night when I first heard this story. Did Vivian want him to find out? Was this meeting calculated, orchestrated over months of planning? Or was it pure accident? A cosmic collision of 2 people who had spent nearly a decade carefully avoiding each other's orbits. If you've ever wondered whether the past can truly stay buried, tap that like button now, because this story proves it absolutely cannot. The truth has a way of surfacing, usually at the worst possible moment, in the most public possible place. And Harrison Cross was about to find out exactly what happens when 9 years of silence comes crashing down in the span of a single heartbeat. She was turning now, fully, her eyes sweeping the lobby as she reached for her son's hand. In 3 seconds, she would see him. In 3 seconds, everything would change. The Chelsea Gallery opening was the kind of event where champagne flowed like water, and everyone who mattered pretended not to notice everyone who didn't. Vivian Sterling stood near the eastern wall, watching strangers admire her work without knowing her name. She was 29 years old, 3 years out of design school, and completely invisible to every person in this room who could have changed her career with a single phone call. She had designed this space. Every angle of light, every placement of sculpture, every carefully considered sightline that drew the eye from piece to piece. That was her vision brought to life over 14-hour days and endless arguments with contractors who didn't understand why the track lighting needed to be angled at precisely 42 degrees. The gallery owner had hired her on a budget that barely covered materials, promising exposure, promising connections, promising that this would be the night everything changed. Instead, she was holding a glass of champagne she couldn't afford to drink too quickly, wearing a dress she'd found at a consignment shop and altered herself, listening to a man in a $3,000 suit explain to his companion that the spatial design was adequate, if somewhat predictable. Adequate, predictable, words that cut deeper than any insult because they reduced months of her creative vision to something forgettable. Vivian wanted to be seen, not as decoration, not as someone's +1, not as the pretty girl standing near the sculpture. She wanted someone to look at what she'd built and understand the intelligence behind it. The hours of calculation, the artistic choices that seemed effortless only because she'd worked so hard to make them appear natural. She was tired of being complimented on her appearance when she wanted to be recognized for her mind. That was when she noticed him. Harrison Cross stood near the gallery entrance, surrounded by people who clearly wanted something from him. Investment, probably, or access, or simply the social currency of being seen in conversation with a man whose family name appeared on buildings across Manhattan. He was younger than she'd expected from the photographs in the business magazines. Early 30s, dark hair, the build of someone who worked out more from discipline than enjoyment. But what struck her wasn't his wealth, or his tailored suit, or the way everyone in his orbit seemed to lean toward him like flowers seeking sun. It was his eyes, tired, heavy with something that looked almost like grief. He was smiling at whoever was speaking to him, nodding at appropriate intervals. But Vivian recognized the performance because she'd been giving her own version of it all evening. Harrison Cross was surrounded by admirers and completely, utterly alone. Their eyes met across the room, just for a moment, long enough for Vivian to look away first, embarrassed to be caught staring at a man so clearly out of her league. She moved toward the back of the gallery, toward the private alcove she'd designed as a contemplation space, a small room with a single sculpture and lighting meant to feel like early morning. It was her favorite part of the installation, the quiet heart of the exhibition, and she needed a moment away from the performance of it all. She didn't expect him to follow. "You designed this space." His voice came from behind her, and Vivian turned to find Harrison Cross standing in the doorway of her alcove, champagne glass in hand, that tired expression replaced by something closer to wonder. "I'm sorry?" She kept her voice neutral, professional. Men like Harrison Cross didn't seek out women like her for conversation about architecture. The lighting angle, the way it shifts as you move through the gallery, it's not random. Someone calculated exactly how the eye would travel from piece to piece. Someone who understood that the space between art is just as important as the art itself. He stepped further into the alcove, his gaze moving across the walls, the ceiling, the carefully positioned spotlight that illuminated the sculpture from below. That someone was you. Vivian felt something shift in her chest. No one had noticed. In 2 hours of mingling and networking and being politely overlooked, not a single person had understood what she'd actually created. How did you know? You've been watching people move through the gallery all evening, adjusting your position to see their reactions from different angles. You're not here to admire the art. You're here to see if your design works. He smiled, and the exhaustion in his eyes lifted slightly. "It works, beautifully." "I wasn't invited," she heard herself say, the truth slipping out before she could stop it. To this conversation, I mean. The party, technically. The gallery owner said I could come, but I'm not on any list. Harrison's expression shifted into something warmer, more genuine. You designed the space. You were absolutely invited. If someone had told Vivian in that moment that she would spend the next 2 years loving this man, she would have laughed. Men like Harrison Cross didn't fall for women like her. They displayed women like her, used them as accessories to their carefully curated public images, discarded them when someone newer and shinier caught their attention. She knew better. She was practical and smart and had watched too many friends destroy themselves chasing men who saw them as decorative rather than essential. She said yes to dinner anyway. The courtship that followed was everything Vivian had been too cynical to believe in and too romantic to resist. Harrison didn't send roses. He sent peonies because she'd mentioned once, in passing during their first dinner, that roses felt like a performance of romance rather than romance itself. He remembered. He paid attention. He noticed the small things that made her who she was and reflected them back to her like gifts. He flew her to Paris for a weekend because she'd said she'd never seen the Musée d'Orsay in person, not to impress her with his wealth, though it did inevitably, but because he wanted to watch her face when she finally stood in front of the Van Goghs she'd been studying in books since she was 15 years old. But the moment that defined everything, the memory that would sustain her through years of silence and single motherhood and wondering if she'd made the right choice, that happened in her cramped studio apartment on a Tuesday night when Harrison Cross, heir to a hotel empire worth more than the GDP of some small countries, sat cross-legged on her paint-stained floor with a container of Thai takeout in his lap. He was wearing a suit that cost more than her monthly rent. He'd come straight from a board meeting, still carrying the tension of whatever battles he'd fought that day. And instead of going back to his penthouse, instead of attending the charity gala where he was expected to make an appearance, he was here, with her, watching her sketch designs for a project that might never get built. "You don't have to stay," Vivian said, not looking up from her work. "I'll be ours. I want to be where you are." 7 words. That was all it took. 7 words, spoken quietly, without performance or expectation. Just truth, offered freely. Vivian looked up from her sketchbook and saw a man who meant exactly what he said. A man who, for all his wealth and power and family obligation, had chosen to spend his Tuesday night on a paint-stained floor because that was where she was. She would remember this moment for the rest of her life. Years later, alone in a hospital room, holding a newborn son whose father didn't know he existed, Vivian would close her eyes and remember Harrison's voice saying those words. "I want to be where you are." It became the measuring stick against which she judged every relationship that followed. And none of them, not the kind architect who proposed when her son was 3, not the gallery owner who pursued her for 2 years, not anyone, ever measured up, not even close. If you've ever had a moment like that, a single instant that became the standard for everything that came after, leave a comment below. I want to know I'm not alone in understanding how one sentence can change everything. The proposal came 6 months later, in the penthouse apartment that Vivian had quietly started thinking of as theirs. Harrison had been nervous all evening, pacing near the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Manhattan, his movements uncharacteristically restless. She knew something was happening. She just didn't know what. And then he was on one knee, a ring box open in his palm, and his voice was breaking in ways she'd never heard before. "I've spent my entire life being what people expect," he said. "The heir, the face of the company, the next generation of Cross. I know how to perform every version of myself that's required. But with you," his voice cracked. He steadied himself. "With you, I don't perform. I just exist. I'm just Harrison. And I don't want to go back to being anything else." Vivian said yes. She said yes because she loved him. Because she believed him. Because she wanted desperately to be the person who saw the real man behind the family name and the fortune and the expectations. But even then, even in that perfect moment, a small voice in the back of her mind noticed what Harrison had actually said. He spoke of performing, of being what people expected, of the weight of becoming what others required him to be. He was telling her, without knowing it, exactly how he would fail her. exactly how the pressure would eventually become too much. Exactly how the man who wanted to just exist would eventually collapse under the weight of being Harrison Cross. She heard the warning. She just didn't listen. Have you ever loved someone who warned you exactly how they'd hurt you? Someone who told you, in their own words, the precise way they would eventually break your heart, and you loved them anyway? Leave a comment below. I want to hear your story. The Connecticut estate stretched across 12 acres of manicured perfection, every hedge trimmed to mathematical precision, every flower bed arranged in colors that progressed through the spectrum in carefully calculated gradients. Vivian had designed spaces for wealthy clients before, but nothing had prepared her for the Cross family compound. It wasn't a home. It was a statement, a monument to generations of accumulated power, maintained by a staff of 23 and presided over by a woman who treated the entire property as an extension of her will. Genevieve Cross sat in the garden, positioned in a white wrought iron chair that functioned unmistakably as a throne. She was 72 years old, impeccably preserved, wearing a silk dress that probably cost more than Vivian's entire wardrobe. On her fingers, emerald rings caught the afternoon light, and she twisted them slowly as Vivian approached. A subtle tell that Vivian would later recognize as calculation in progress. "So, you're the designer." Genevieve's voice was pleasant, even warm. Her smile never reached her eyes. "Harrison has told me so much about you, though not nearly enough, I'm afraid. He's always been secretive about the things that matter to him." "It's lovely to meet you, Mrs. Cross. Your gardens are extraordinary." "Aren't they? 40 years of cultivation. Some things require patience to perfect." The emerald rings twisted again. "What a charming dress, dear. I had one just like it, years ago, of course." The implication landed exactly where it was intended. Vivian's dress was not just outdated. It was beneath this setting, beneath this family, beneath the woman who would soon be her mother-in-law. "How industrious you must be," Genevieve continued, gesturing for Vivian to sit. "Interior design, it must be satisfying work, making other people's homes beautiful. Of course, the Cross properties have been handled by the same firm for 3 generations, family tradition, but I'm sure your little projects are very fulfilling." Every word was a velvet-covered knife. Every compliment drew blood. And the worst part was that Vivian couldn't fight back. Not without seeming ungrateful, oversensitive, difficult. Genevieve had perfected the art of the attack that leaves no visible wounds. Later, in the car, Vivian tried to explain what she'd experienced. "She's protective," Harrison said, his hand finding hers across the console. "I'm all she has, Viv. My father's been gone for years. She just wants to make sure I'm happy. She doesn't like me. She doesn't know you yet. Give her time." Vivian could have fought harder. She could have been louder, more insistent, made herself impossible to ignore or dismiss. Instead, she was polite, professional, everything a future Cross should be. She played by the rules of a game she was never meant to win, and Genevieve took her measure exactly. The old woman saw a girl who could be removed, a temporary obstacle, an engagement that wouldn't survive the right application of pressure applied at precisely the right moment. She just hadn't chosen her moment yet. But she would. The phone rang at 2 in the morning, and Vivian knew before Harrison answered that everything was about to change. She felt it in the way the sound cut through the darkness of the penthouse bedroom. Sharp and wrong. Harrison reached for his phone with the practiced ease of a man accustomed to middle-of-the-night emergencies. Hotel crises, international deals gone wrong, the endless demands of managing a global empire. But when he saw the caller ID, his hand trembled. "Hello?" His voice was steady, professional, the voice he used in boardrooms when everything was falling apart and no one could know. Vivian watched from her side of the bed as his shoulders began to shake. "How long does she have?" The words hung in the air between them, and Vivian understood. Genevieve, the woman who had looked at her with calculating eyes and found her wanting, the woman who twisted emerald rings while delivering compliments designed to wound, the woman who had raised Harrison to perform, to become whatever was required of him, to sacrifice himself on the altar of family expectation. She was dying. Harrison listened for another minute, asking questions in a voice that grew increasingly hollow. Stage 4. Discovered too late because Genevieve Cross was someone who considered illness a personal weakness, and doctors an imposition. Weeks, the voice on the other end said. Maybe months, if they were lucky, but probably weeks. When he hung up, Harrison sat on the edge of the bed with his back to Vivian, and she watched him transform. It happened in seconds. The man who wanted to be wherever she was, the man who sat on paint-stained floors and flew her to Paris and proposed with a breaking voice, that man simply vanished. In his place was someone she didn't recognize, someone whose spine had gone rigid with duty, someone who was already calculating the obligations ahead, the expectations that would need to be met, the performance that would need to be given. Harrison, she reached for him. Her hand landed on his shoulder, and she felt him flinch. She's asked to see me alone. His voice was flat, empty, just family. Just family. Two words that landed like a physical blow to Vivian's chest. She was wearing his ring. She had reorganized her entire life around their future together. She had sat in Genevieve's garden and endured the velvet-covered attacks and told herself it would get better with time, that eventually she would belong to this world he'd been born into. Just family. She wasn't family. She was still, after everything, an outsider. "I'll wait for you," she said, because she didn't know what else to say. Harrison stood without looking at her. He was already packing a bag, already making calls, already becoming the dutiful son his mother had always required him to be. "I'll call you," he said. He didn't. 3 days passed in a kind of limbo Vivian had never experienced before. She existed in the penthouse that had started to feel like home, surrounded by the evidence of their shared life. Her sketchbooks on the coffee table, her toothbrush in the bathroom, the peonies he'd sent last week wilting on the kitchen counter because she kept forgetting to add water. She checked her phone every few minutes, then every few seconds, watching for his name to appear. Brief texts arrived occasionally, saying nothing of substance. "Still here, will call soon, love you." But he didn't call. Vivian didn't know if she was still engaged. She didn't know if she was still loved. She didn't know anything except that something terrible was building, something she couldn't see clearly but could feel in her bones. On the 4th day, Harrison appeared at her door. He didn't come inside. Vivian saw it in his face immediately. The decision already made, the words already rehearsed. He looked exhausted, hollow, like a man who had been crying for days and had finally run out of tears. But beneath the grief, she saw something else. Resolution. The look of someone who had made a terrible choice and was committed to seeing it through. "I can't do this," he said. 3 words. That was all it took to end everything. Vivian felt herself go cold from the inside out. "Can't do what?" "This. Us." He gestured vaguely at the space between them. The engagement, the wedding, any of it. "Harrison," she heard her own voice, distant and strange. "Your mother is dying. You're not thinking clearly. Come inside. We'll talk about this when—" "My mother is dying." He cut her off, and his voice cracked on the word, mother. "And her last wish, her final request, is to see me settled with someone appropriate, someone from our world, someone who understands what it means to be a cross." Appropriate, there it was. The word Genevieve had been circling around for months, finally spoken aloud. "You're choosing her." Vivian's voice was steady now, cold with a clarity she hadn't expected. "That's what this is. You're choosing your dying mother over your living fiancé. I'm choosing not to let my mother die thinking her son failed her." Harrison's eyes were wet, but his jaw was set. "I'm choosing to give her peace in her final weeks. I'm choosing to be exactly what she trained you to be." Vivian stepped back from the doorway, putting distance between them. A performer, a good son, someone who does what's expected instead of what's right. "Vivian, please. And what about failing me?" The question came out louder than she intended, sharp with pain she hadn't known she was carrying. "What about the promises you made? What about the man who said he didn't want to perform anymore? What about, I want to be where you are?" Harrison flinched like she'd struck him. Good. She wanted him to feel it. "I never wanted this," he said quietly. "But you're doing it anyway." He had no answer for that, because there was no answer. He was standing in front of her, choosing his mother's approval over their future together, and no amount of explanation could change what that meant. Vivian looked down at her hand, at the ring that had once meant everything, the promise of a life together, of being seen and chosen and loved for exactly who she was. It felt heavy now, wrong, a symbol of something that had never really been hers at all. She pulled it off her finger. The motion was steady, deliberate. She didn't cry. She wouldn't give him that. She placed the ring in his palm and watched his fingers close around it reflexively, like catching something he'd dropped. "Get out! Vivian, you don't get to explain." Her voice was ice, pure crystalline ice formed from the death of something that had been warm and alive just moments before. "You don't get to justify. You don't get to tell me about your mother's final wishes or your family obligations or any of the reasons why I'm not enough. You made your choice. Now live with it." He stood there for a long moment, ring clutched in his hand, looking at her with an expression she would remember for years. Grief and guilt and something that might have been regret, if regret were enough to change anything. It wasn't. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "You're a coward." The words came from somewhere deep inside her, from the place where her love was already beginning to curdle into something harder and darker. "And your mother trained you well." She closed the door in his face. She listened to his footsteps retreat down the hallway. She listened to the elevator arrive, the doors open and close, the mechanical hum of his descent. And only when she was certain he was gone, truly gone, not coming back, not changing his mind, did she allow herself to slide down the wall and sit on the floor with her knees pulled to her chest. She didn't cry. She was too angry to cry. "Family, if this moment hit you the way it hit me, I need you to share this story right now. Someone in your life needs to hear it. Someone is going through exactly what Vivian went through, being told they're not enough, being traded for someone else's approval. Hit that share button. Send this to them. Let them know they're not alone." 6 weeks later, Vivian stood in the bathroom of her cramped apartment, not the penthouse, never the penthouse again, staring at 4 plastic sticks lined up on the counter like soldiers delivering identical verdicts. Positive, 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 positive. She had taken 4 tests because she didn't believe the first one, or the second, or the third. But the 4th forced her to accept what her body had already been telling her for weeks. The nausea, the exhaustion, the way certain smells made her stomach turn. She was pregnant, with Harrison Cross's child. Vivian sat on the cold tile floor for an hour, maybe longer. She lost track of time, her mind racing through possibilities like a calculator running endless equations. She could tell him. She had every right to tell him. He was the father, and despite everything, despite the way he'd chosen his mother over her, he deserved to know. But if she told him, she would become an obligation, a responsibility, not a choice. He would come back, maybe, but not for her, for the child, for the optics of it, the appearance of doing the right thing. She would spend the rest of her life wondering if he was there because he wanted to be, or because duty demanded it. And there was something else, something darker that Vivian wasn't proud of but couldn't deny. He had left her. He had chosen someone else's approval over her love. He had looked at her and decided she wasn't worth fighting for. "You don't deserve to know." The thought crystallized in her mind like ice forming on a winter window. "You don't deserve to know about this child. You don't deserve to watch them grow up. You don't deserve any of it, because you weren't there when I needed you. You chose your mother's dying wish over our living future, and now you get to live with that choice forever." Vivian moved 3 weeks later. She found a position with a design firm in a new city, a place where no one knew her name or her history, where she could start over without the shadow of Harrison Cross following her everywhere she went. She worked until she couldn't anymore, and then she worked from home, sketching designs with one hand and resting the other on her growing belly. She didn't tell anyone who the father was. When colleagues asked, she smiled and said it was complicated. When her own parents pressed for details, she gave them just enough to satisfy their concern. A relationship that ended badly, a man who wasn't in the picture anymore, nothing they needed to worry about. She was alone when she went into labor. She was alone when she held her son for the first time. 8 pounds, 6 ounces, a perfect, screaming, red-faced miracle who looked at her with eyes she recognized immediately. Harrison's eyes, staring back at her from a newborn's face. The nurse came in with paperwork while Vivian was still counting fingers and toes, still marveling at the weight of this tiny person in her arms. "Have you chosen a name?" "Ethan," Vivian said without hesitation. She had known for months. "Beautiful. And the last name?" Vivian paused. She could use her own name. Sterling. It was what made sense. It was what would protect him, keep him anonymous, prevent any connection to the man who had abandoned them both without even knowing they existed. But something stopped her. She thought of Harrison standing in her doorway with his shoulders rigid and his mother's expectations weighing him down like chains. She thought of Genevieve twisting her emerald rings, calculating, manipulating, winning. She thought of all the ways the Cross family had found her unworthy, insufficient, not quite enough. And she made a decision. "Cross," she said. Her voice was steady, final. "Ethan Cross." The nurse wrote it down without question, without understanding the weight of what she was recording. This wasn't forgiveness. Vivian had no forgiveness left to give. This was a brand, a mark, a quiet form of revenge that Harrison would never even know about. Unless someday, somewhere, he happened to encounter a boy with his eyes and his name and realized what he had lost. "You left me with nothing," Vivian thought, looking down at her son. "You chose your family's approval over me, but I'm giving him your name anyway, the only inheritance I'll ever let you provide." She held her son close and made a silent promise. He would never know his father abandoned him. He would never feel like he wasn't enough. He would never, ever become a performer. And Harrison Cross would never, ever know he existed. Or so she thought. 9 years is a long time to build a life from nothing, but Vivian Sterling did it anyway. She started small, freelance projects for friends of friends, designing living rooms and kitchens on budgets that barely covered materials, working after her son fell asleep at night because daylight hours belonged to him. She couldn't afford childcare at first, so she brought him to consultations, strapped into a stroller with a sippy cup in one hand and a crayon in the other, and she learned to pitch her vision to clients while simultaneously preventing a toddler from drawing on their walls. It was messy, it was exhausting, it was hers. Slowly, word spread. Vivian had a gift that set her apart from the polished designers who filled homes with expensive furniture that no one was allowed to touch. Her spaces felt alive, warm, inhabited. She created rooms where families could actually live, where children could spill juice on the sofa without anyone having a breakdown, where the kitchen was the center of everything, where every corner held something personal and meaningful rather than something selected from a catalog. Clients told their friends, friends told their colleagues. Within 5 years, Vivian had a waiting list. Within 7, she had a small studio with 2 employees. By year 8, regional magazines were calling her an innovator, a designer who understood that a home should feel like an embrace rather than a museum. She had built something real, something that belonged entirely to her, untouched by the Cross family fortune, untainted by the memory of a man who had chosen duty over love. And through all of it, every milestone and every struggle, there was her son. Ethan grew in sudden, startling bursts that left Vivian constantly buying new shoes and adjusting hemlines. Lanky limbs that seemed to stretch overnight. Enormous dark eyes that observed everything with an intensity that sometimes startled strangers. He was quiet in ways that thoughtful children are quiet. Not shy exactly, but selective about where he directed his attention. His notebooks were filled with drawings, and the drawings were always the same. Buildings, towers, cities that existed only in his imagination, with bridges connecting rooftops and gardens growing on balconies and windows that looked out onto impossible landscapes. He drew in ways his mother designed, with instinct and precision in equal measure. Vivian watched her son create these imaginary worlds and saw Harrison in every careful line. The concentration, the way his brow furrowed when something wasn't right. The quiet satisfaction when a drawing finally matched the vision in his head. Her son was his father's child in ways that went far beyond the familiar eyes and the dark hair, and some days the resemblance was so sharp it took her breath away. The question came when he was 4 years old. Vivian had been preparing for it since the day he was born. rehearsing answers in the shower, testing different versions on long drives while he slept in the back seat. She had practiced being calm, being honest without being cruel, being truthful without being complete. Where's my dad? They were sitting at the kitchen table, eating macaroni and cheese from a box because Vivian had been too exhausted after work to cook anything more ambitious. Her son looked at her with those enormous eyes, Harrison's eyes, and asked the question like he was asking about the weather. He's not here, baby. But where? Far away. Why? Vivian set down her fork. She took a breath. She reached across the table and covered her son's small hand with her own, because sometimes grown-ups make choices that take them away from people they should stay with. He considered this with the seriousness of a 4-year-old processing information that was far too heavy for his small shoulders. Did he make a bad choice? He made a complicated choice. Is he coming back? I don't think so, sweetheart. He nodded, picked up his fork, and went back to his macaroni. And Vivian thought, foolishly, that this would be the end of it. It wasn't. Instead, her son developed a habit that broke her heart in ways she hadn't known were possible. Whenever they were out together, at the grocery store, at school pickup, at the park on Saturday mornings, and he encountered a man of a certain age, tall, dark-haired, something indefinable in the eyes, he would approach with the fearless directness that only very young children possess. "Are you my daddy?" The first time it happened, Vivian was standing in the checkout line at the supermarket. A man behind them, probably mid-30s, dark hair, wearing a suit, was loading groceries onto the conveyor belt. Her son tugged on the man's sleeve and looked up at him with those searching eyes. "Are you my daddy?" The man laughed uncomfortably, glanced at Vivian, shook his head. "No, buddy, I'm not." "Oh." Her son's face fell, just slightly, just enough. "Okay." It happened again at school pickup. A father collecting his own child, crouching down to zip a jacket, and suddenly Vivian's son was there, standing in front of a stranger, asking the only question that mattered to him. "Are you my daddy?" "No, I'm sorry, I'm not." "Okay." At the park, at the library, at the dentist's office, anywhere a tall, dark-haired man existed in proximity to her son, the question would surface, sometimes whispered, sometimes announced at full volume, always followed by the same small okay when the answer was no. Vivian learned to intercept. She became an expert at reading her son's body language, at knowing when his attention had fixed on someone, at redirecting him before the question could leave his lips. She would point at something, a dog, a bird, a cloud shaped like a dinosaur, anything to break the moment before it happened, but she couldn't catch every instance. And every time the answer was no, something in her son's eyes dimmed, just a fraction, just enough for a mother to notice and for no one else to see. He was looking for someone who didn't know he existed, searching for a face he'd never seen, a voice he'd never heard, a presence that had been absent since before he took his first breath. And the quiet, persistent longing of it, the way he kept asking, kept hoping, kept believing that maybe the next tall man with dark hair would be the one, was the cruelest thing Vivian had ever witnessed. Have you ever searched for someone who didn't know you were looking? That quiet longing hits different, doesn't it? Leave a comment if you understand what that feels like, because this boy understood it before he could even spell his own name. While Vivian was building a life from the ground up, Harrison Cross was drowning in the one he'd chosen. The miracle happened 6 months after he broke the engagement. Genevieve Cross, diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, given weeks to live, responded to an experimental treatment with a vigor that stunned her medical team. The tumors shrank, her strength returned, color came back to her face. Doctors used words like remarkable and unprecedented and blessed, and Genevieve accepted their admiration with the practiced graciousness of a woman who had never doubted her own ability to overcome anything, including death. She recovered, fully, completely, and Harrison was left standing in the wreckage of a sacrifice that had been rendered pointless. He had given up Vivian for his mother's dying wish, and his mother hadn't died. The woman who had demanded he choose someone appropriate was now hosting charity galas and redecorating the Connecticut estate and twisting her emerald rings with the same calculating precision she'd always possessed. She never mentioned the engagement, never acknowledged what Harrison had given up, never said thank you, because in Genevieve's mind, there was nothing to thank him for. He had simply done what was expected. He had been a good son. He had performed correctly. Harrison dated the women his mother found acceptable, heiresses who understood the social calendar, executives who could hold their own at fundraisers and board dinners, women whose emotional depth was carefully contained, who never demanded too much vulnerability, who were content to exist alongside him without ever truly knowing him. None of them lasted more than a few months. None of them sat on his floor eating takeout while he watched them work. None of them challenged him to be honest about what he actually felt. None of them looked at him and saw anything other than the Cross family name and everything it represented. None of them made him feel like himself instead of a performance. In his desk drawer, hidden beneath quarterly reports and financial projections, Harrison kept a photograph. It was old, slightly creased from being handled too often, the colors beginning to fade. Vivian, laughing, her head thrown back, eyes bright, mouth open in genuine joy. He couldn't remember what she'd been laughing at. Something he'd said, probably. Something ordinary and unremarkable that had made her whole face come alive. He touched the photograph when he was alone in his office late at night, when the building was empty and no one could see the CEO of Cross Hospitality Group sitting at his desk with a faded picture in his hands and an expression that looked remarkably like grief. He wondered where she was, whether she was happy, whether she'd found someone who deserved her in ways he never had. He never looked for her, because he had given up that right when he walked away from her door with a ring in his pocket and her words ringing in his ears. "You're a coward, and your mother trained you well." He didn't get to search for her now. He didn't get to reach out, to apologize, to try to repair what he'd destroyed. That privilege had been forfeited the moment he chose performance over truth. And then, in the 9th year, his assistant placed a magazine on his desk, a regional publication, nothing Harrison would normally read. He dealt in global markets, international properties, the kind of press coverage measured in millions of impressions. But his assistant had flagged an article about innovative designers reshaping residential spaces, and there, on page 47, was a photograph that made Harrison's lungs forget how to function. Vivian, older now, lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before, lines that spoke of laughter and worry and years lived without him. Still beautiful, more beautiful really, in ways that women who have survived difficult things become beautiful, not fragile but forged. She was standing in a warehouse studio filled with fabric samples and architectural models and coffee cups in various stages of emptiness, and she was looking at the camera with an expression Harrison recognized instantly. Confidence, hard-won, carefully maintained, entirely her own. The article called her Vivian Cole. She'd taken her mother's maiden name, he realized, erased Sterling, erased any connection to the life she'd lived before or after him. Harrison read the article 3 times, then a 4th. His hands shook the entire time. Her design philosophy, her client list, growing steadily. The way she spoke about creating spaces that felt honest rather than impressive. Every word sounded like the woman he'd loved, matured and sharpened by a decade he knew nothing about. He closed the magazine, opened it again, stared at her photograph until his vision blurred. His assistant knocked on the office door an hour later, asking about the afternoon schedule. "Her firm," Harrison said, his voice sounding strange even to his own ears. "The designer in the article. We have that renovation project for the downtown property. Should we reach out?" His assistant waited, pen poised. There were dozens of established firms who could handle the renovation. Firms with international reputations, firms that had worked with Cross Properties before, firms that didn't require their CEO to sit at his desk with trembling hands and nearly a decade of regret pooling in his chest. He should say no. He should leave her alone. He should respect the distance she'd created and the life she'd built without him, and the choice he'd made 9 years ago to let her go. "Yes," Harrison said. "Set up a meeting." And with those 4 words, the 9 years of careful distance between them began to collapse. Harrison didn't sleep the night before the meeting. He hadn't expected to, but he'd tried, lying in the darkness of the penthouse bedroom, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant hum of the city below, the same penthouse, the same windows, the same view of Manhattan that had once made him feel powerful and now made him feel like a man trapped inside a monument to his own choices. At midnight, he gave up pretending. He swung his legs off the bed and walked barefoot across the cold hardwood floor to the living room, where floor-to-ceiling windows framed a skyline that sparkled with indifferent beauty. The city didn't care about Harrison Cross. It didn't care about his regrets or his insomnia, or the fact that in 12 hours he would be in the same room as the woman he had failed nearly a decade ago. He opened his desk drawer. The photograph was exactly where he'd left it, tucked beneath a leather portfolio he never used. The edges had gone soft from years of handling, the corners rounded and slightly fuzzy, the image itself beginning to lose its sharpness. But Vivian's face was still clear, still laughing, still radiant with joy that Harrison hadn't seen in anyone since. Because he'd stopped looking, really. He'd stopped believing that such joy was something he was allowed to be near. He held the photograph under the desk lamp and studied it in ways he'd studied it hundreds of times before. The tilt of her head, the way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she laughed fully, without reservation. The paint smudge on her left wrist that she'd probably forgotten was there. "I'm sorry." The words came out quiet, almost involuntary. 2 words he had never spoken to the real woman. 2 words that felt absurdly inadequate for the magnitude of what he'd done. What do you say to someone you abandoned? What possible arrangement of language could bridge a 9-year gap filled with silence and cowardice and regret that doesn't fade with time but deepens, settling into your bones like a permanent ache? He might get the chance to say them tomorrow. The meeting was scheduled for 2 in the afternoon. His assistant had arranged everything: the conference room on the 42nd floor, the project brief for the downtown hotel renovation, the professional context that made this encounter legitimate rather than desperate. Vivian's firm had accepted the invitation. She was coming to the flagship Cross property to discuss a potential contract worth more than her annual revenue. She was coming to his territory, and Harrison had no idea what he was going to do when he saw her. He stood at the window until dawn broke over the East River, watching the sky shift from black to violet to pale gold, watching the city wake up in layers. Delivery trucks first, then joggers, then the gradual tide of commuters flowing toward their obligations. He rehearsed conversations in his head, apologies, explanations, the truth about his mother's recovery, about the years of empty relationships that followed, about the photograph in his desk drawer that he touched like a relic of a better version of himself. But every rehearsed speech sounded hollow, insufficient. What could he possibly say that would matter? And more importantly, would Vivian give him the chance to say anything at all? She arrived at the Grand Meridian at 20 minutes before 2, and she was ready for war. Not visibly, of course. Vivian Cole, she still used her mother's maiden name professionally, a choice Harrison would note with sharp pain in his chest, walked through the revolving glass doors looking every inch the accomplished designer she had become. Tailored blazer, portfolio case, the quiet confidence of a woman who had earned her place through talent and persistence rather than connections or inheritance. She had prepared for this meeting in ways she prepared for every client presentation, thoroughly, professionally, without a single detail left to chance. She had also prepared for awkwardness. She knew who owned Cross Hospitality Group. She had known since the moment Harrison's assistant reached out to her firm, and she had spent 3 days arguing with herself about whether to accept the invitation. The money was significant. A renovation contract with the Cross flagship property would elevate her firm to an entirely different level. A project that attracted other projects, that built reputations, that transformed a successful small business into something larger and more permanent. She could handle being in the same building as Harrison Cross. She was a professional. She was a grown woman who had raised a child alone and built a career from nothing and survived a broken heart without breaking herself in the process. She could sit in a conference room and discuss color palettes and spatial design without falling apart. What she had not prepared for was what happened next. Her son was with her. The meeting fell during his school break week, and the babysitter she'd arranged had cancelled that morning with a stomach virus and profuse apologies. Vivian had considered rescheduling, but the meeting had already been moved twice due to conflicts on the Cross team's end, and she didn't want to appear unprofessional. Her son, was 9. He was well behaved. He could sit in a lobby with his sketchbook for an hour without causing problems. So she'd brought him. He settled onto one of the leather benches near the reception area, with the practiced ease of a child who was accustomed to waiting in lobbies and reception rooms and the quiet corners of his mother's studio. His sketchbook came out immediately, and within seconds he was absorbed in a drawing of the lobby's crystal chandeliers, capturing the way the light fractured through the glass pendants in careful pencil strokes. Vivian checked in at the reception desk, confirmed her 2 o'clock appointment, received a visitor's badge and directions to the conference room on the 42nd floor. She turned to tell her son she'd be back in an hour, and the world stopped. Harrison was standing 15 feet away. He wasn't looking at her. He wasn't even aware of her presence. Not yet. His attention was fixed on something near the leather bench, something on the floor, and the expression on his face was one Vivian had never seen before in all the time she'd known him. Not grief, exactly. Not confusion. Something deeper and more devastating. The look of a man who had just watched the foundation of his reality crack open beneath his feet. Vivian followed his gaze and felt her blood turn to ice. The backpack, navy blue, silver airplane zipper pull. And there, written across the front pocket in her son's careful handwriting, the name she had chosen in a hospital room 9 years ago as an act of defiance and grief, and something she still couldn't entirely name: Ethan Cross. Harrison's eyes moved from the backpack to the boy, slowly, as if his mind was processing information it couldn't quite accept. Vivian watched him catalogue the details: the dark hair that curled at the temples, the angular jaw that was already beginning to show the bone structure it would carry into adulthood, the way the boy tilted his head slightly to the left when he was concentrating, exactly as Harrison did when he was studying financial reports. His own gestures, his own features, reflected back at him from the face of a child he had never known existed. Then Harrison's eyes found Vivian. The color had drained from his face completely. He looked like a man who had been struck by something invisible and was still trying to understand the impact. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Is he?" Vivian didn't answer. Her jaw was clenched so tightly she could feel her teeth grinding against each other. Her hands had curled into fists at her sides. Not in anger exactly, but in the desperate, instinctive need to hold herself together in front of this man who had once held the power to destroy her and was now looking at her with an expression that threatened to undo every wall she had built in the past 9 years. She didn't need to answer. The evidence was right there, in the boy's face, in his name, in the backpack that bore the Cross family legacy in permanent marker. Harrison's voice cracked like something breaking. "He's mine." "No." The word came out cold and sharp, a blade forged over 9 years of single motherhood and swallowed fury. "He's mine. He's always been mine. You made sure of that." "I didn't know." "You didn't want to know. There's a difference." The distinction landed where she intended it, squarely in the center of Harrison's chest, because she was right, and they both knew it. He hadn't reached out, hadn't searched for her, hadn't even allowed himself to wonder, during all those years of looking at her photograph in his desk drawer, whether there might be consequences to the time they'd shared. He had chosen not to know. Chosen the comfortable ignorance of a man who had already decided that his sacrifice was sufficient penance. This is the moment, family. The moment everything changes. If you're feeling this story, hit that like button right now. Leave a comment. Tell me, was Vivian right to keep this secret? Was Harrison wrong to leave? I want to hear what you think, because I've been going back and forth on this one. And honestly, I still don't have a clear answer. At the leather bench, the boy looked up from his sketchbook. He had felt the shift in the air in ways children do. Not understanding the words, but sensing the tension, the electricity of two adults locked in a confrontation they'd been building toward for nearly a decade. He saw his mother standing rigid, her shoulders squared, her chin lifted in the posture she adopted when she was trying very hard not to cry. And he saw the tall man standing near her, the one who looked like he'd forgotten how to breathe. The man was staring at him, not in ways strangers usually stared, with momentary curiosity before their attention moved on. Not in ways men at the grocery store and the park had stared when he'd approached them with his impossible question, with discomfort and awkward laughter and a quick retreat. This man was looking at him like he was terrified, like he was precious, like he was seeing something impossible, something he'd never expected to encounter, something that had rearranged the entire architecture of his understanding. The boy had asked dozens of strangers the same question over the years. "Are you my daddy?" He'd learned to read the answer before it was spoken. The uncomfortable shift, the nervous glance toward his mother, the gentle shake of the head. This time, he didn't need to ask. He didn't understand how he knew. He just did. "Mom?" His voice was small, uncertain. He looked at his mother for guidance, for the reassuring nod or quiet redirection that usually followed these moments of tension in adult spaces. But his mother wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the tall man, and her eyes were filled with something the boy had never seen there before. Fear. Vivian moved between them, positioning herself in front of the bench in ways she'd positioned herself in front of every threat that had ever approached her son. Shield first, questions later. Protect first, explain never. We're leaving. Vivian, wait. You don't get to say my name like that. Her voice shook for the first time, the ice cracking just enough to reveal the heat beneath. Not anymore. I didn't know. Harrison took a step forward, and Vivian took a step back, maintaining the distance between them like a physical necessity. You have to believe me. I didn't know he existed. I would have... You would have what? She turned on him then, and the fury in her eyes was 9 years concentrated. Come back? Played father? Fit us into your schedule between board meetings and your mother's dinner parties? You would have turned my son into another obligation you resented? That's not... I don't have to believe anything you say. I learned that lesson 9 years ago. She reached for her son's hand. He took it immediately, sliding off the bench with his sketchbook clutched against his chest. She gathered the backpack, that navy blue backpack with the name that had detonated Harrison's world, and slung it over her shoulder. She walked toward the exit. Steady steps, measured pace, the walk of a woman who refused to let anyone see her run. Harrison's voice followed her across the marble lobby, carrying over the soft piano music and the murmur of guests and the polite bustle of the Grand Meridian's afternoon traffic. I want to know him. Vivian stopped, 5 feet from the glass doors, sunlight streaming through them, illuminating the dust motes floating in the air between her and the exit. She didn't turn around. Then you should have stayed. The glass doors opened. The city swallowed them. Woman and boy, mother and son, disappearing into the afternoon crowd like 2 more people in a world full of people, none of whom knew that the child holding his mother's hand carried a billionaire's last name and a lifetime of questions that had just, finally, found their answer. Harrison Cross stood alone in the lobby of his flagship hotel, the hotel he had built into an empire, the marble floors he had selected, the crystal chandeliers he had commissioned, the pinnacle of everything he had achieved in a career defined by ambition and discipline, and the relentless pursuit of excellence. All of it meaningless, because everything that mattered, everything he had lost, everything he had never known he'd lost, had just walked out through the front doors. For the second time, and this time, she had taken his son with her. Harrison didn't go back to his office. His assistant called twice, then 3 times, then sent a carefully worded text about the international investors waiting in the conference room and the $40 million deal that required his signature before end of business. Harrison read the message, put his phone in his pocket, and walked out of the Grand Meridian through the service entrance because he couldn't bear to cross the lobby again. He couldn't stand on the marble floor where he'd just watched his son walk away from him without knowing who he was. He couldn't look at the leather bench where a boy with his own face had been drawing chandeliers in a sketchbook while his father stood 15 feet away, too stunned to speak. The car took him north. He didn't give the driver a destination at first, just sat in the back seat with his forehead pressed against the cool glass of the window, watching the city blur past in streaks of grey and silver. His mind was running calculations he couldn't stop. 9 years. The boy was 8 or 9, which meant Vivian had been pregnant when he left. Had she known? Had she already been carrying his child when he stood in her doorway and ended everything? Had she watched him walk away knowing that she was not alone in that apartment, that there was already a heartbeat inside her that bore his genetic code? The math was devastating in its simplicity. He told the driver to take him to Connecticut. The Cross estate looked the same as it always had. 12 acres of controlled perfection, every hedge sculpted, every flower bed arranged according to Genevieve's exacting standards. The driveway curved through rows of mature oaks that had been planted by Harrison's grandfather and maintained by a team of groundskeepers who understood that even a single brown leaf on the gravel path was grounds for discussion. It was beautiful in ways a museum is beautiful, impressive and cold, and designed to communicate a message about the people who owned it. Genevieve was in the garden. Of course she was. The garden was her domain, the place where she held court and received visitors and dispensed judgments wrapped in pleasantries. She sat in her white wrought-iron chair, the same position, as if the past decade had been a single unbroken afternoon, with a cup of tea on the table beside her and roses blooming in every direction. Pink and white and deep crimson, trained to climb the trellises she'd had installed 15 years ago, cascading overhead like a living canopy. She looked up as Harrison approached, and her expression shifted into the particular form of maternal concern she deployed when she sensed something required managing. "You look terrible, darling. What's happened?" Harrison sat down across from her without being invited. He placed his hands flat on the table, steadying himself in ways he steadied himself in boardrooms when negotiations turned volatile. But this wasn't a negotiation. This was something far worse. "Vivian," he said. Genevieve's hand moved to her emerald ring. The left one. She twisted it, a quarter turn. "I saw her today. At the hotel. She came in for a meeting." "How unfortunate." Genevieve lifted her teacup, sipped, set it down with perfect precision. "I imagine that was awkward for you both." "She has a son." The teacup remained steady. Genevieve's expression didn't change. Not a flicker of surprise, not a widening of the eyes, not the smallest indication that this information was anything other than mildly interesting. "How nice for her." "His name is on his backpack, written in marker." Harrison leaned forward. "His last name is Cross." The emerald rings twisted. "Twice. 3 times. Well," Genevieve said carefully, "that's certainly unexpected." "Is it?" "What are you implying, Harrison?" He watched his mother's face with the attention he usually reserved for business rivals across a negotiation table. He watched for the tells she'd taught him to hide in himself, the micro-expressions, the involuntary movements, the tiny fractures in composure that revealed what lay beneath the performance. Because Genevieve Cross had taught her son to perform, which meant she had also, inadvertently, taught him to recognize performances in others. And right now, his mother was performing. "You knew." "Don't be dramatic, Harrison. You knew she was pregnant when you made me leave her." Genevieve set down her teacup with a faint click of porcelain against porcelain. "I knew nothing of the sort. If that girl chose to keep secrets, that's hardly my fault. Women in her position often make calculated decisions about..." "Her position?" Harrison's voice dropped to something low and dangerous. "You mean the position of a woman abandoned by the father of her child?" "I mean the position of a woman who was clearly unsuitable for this family and who, it seems, made her own choices about how to handle the consequences. She didn't keep secrets." The words came out steady, precise, each one placed like a stone in a wall he was building between himself and the woman who had raised him. She protected herself from this family, from me, from exactly the kind of cruelty you're displaying right now. "Harrison, you were dying." His voice hardened, losing the controlled corporate tone and finding something raw underneath. "That's what you told me. Weeks to live, maybe months. You stood in this garden and told me your last wish was to see me settled with someone appropriate, and I believed you. I destroyed the best thing in my life because I believed my mother was dying. The doctors were wrong." Genevieve's chin lifted. "These things happen. Medical science is imperfect. I was blessed with a recovery that..." "Do they, Mother? Do these things happen?" Harrison stood, and his chair scraped against the flagstone patio with a sound that made Genevieve flinch. "Because I've spent 9 years accepting your miracle recovery without question. 9 years telling myself that at least my sacrifice had meaning, that at least I gave you peace in what I thought were your final days. But now I'm standing here looking at a woman who hasn't aged a day in nearly a decade, who runs this estate with the energy of someone half her age, who attends every charity gala and every board meeting and every social function without the slightest sign of fragility. And I'm asking myself a question I should have asked years ago. He placed both hands on the table and leaned close enough to see the almost imperceptible tightening around his mother's eyes. Show me the medical records. Excuse me? Your diagnosis, your treatment records, your doctor's notes, the scans, the blood work, all of it. Harrison's gaze didn't waver. Show me proof that you were actually dying, Mother, and I'll apologize for doubting you. I'll get on my knees in this garden and beg your forgiveness. Genevieve's mask flickered. It was brief, a fraction of a second, a momentary collapse of the carefully maintained facade she'd worn for as long as Harrison could remember. But he saw it, the flash of something behind her eyes that looked not like guilt exactly, but like the recognition of a strategy that had finally been exposed. Just for a moment, just long enough. You faked it. How dare you? You faked a terminal illness to destroy my engagement. Harrison's voice was shaking now, trembling with the force of a revelation that was rewriting every assumption he'd held about his own life for the past 9 years. You made me believe my mother was dying so I'd abandon the woman I loved. You manipulated your own son with a lie about death, about your death, so you could control who I married. I saved you from a fortune hunter. She never wanted my money. His voice cracked, the composure finally shattering. In the garden, birds scattered from nearby trees at the sudden volume. She never cared about the cross name or the hotels or the fortune. She wanted me, just me, the man on the paint-stained floor with the takeout. And you took that away from both of us, from all three of us. Genevieve said nothing. The emerald rings had stopped twisting. Her hands lay flat on the table, perfectly still. And in their stillness, Harrison saw the truth more clearly than any confession could have provided. His mother didn't deny it again. When the truth finally comes out, it changes everything. If this moment hit you in ways it just hit me, share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Hit that button right now, because some truths are too important to keep to yourself. 14 miles away, Vivian sat in the driver's seat of her car in the Grand Meridian's parking garage, gripping the steering wheel with both hands as if the leather beneath her fingers was the only solid thing left in a world that had just tilted violently on its axis. The engine was off. The garage was dim and quiet, amplifying every sound. The tick of the cooling engine, the distant echo of traffic from the street above, the soft breathing of the boy in the passenger seat beside her. Her son was watching her. She could feel his gaze without turning to meet it. Steady, patient, careful. Watching in ways he always watched when he sensed something important was happening and didn't want to disturb it by asking the wrong question at the wrong time. "Mom?" His voice was quiet. "Who was that man?" Vivian's hands tightened on the wheel. She could feel the ridges of the leather stitching pressing into her palms, leaving marks that would fade in minutes, but that she would remember far longer. She had always known this moment would come. She had rehearsed it, planned for it, prepared careful phrases and gentle explanations designed to deliver the truth without causing damage. All of that preparation evaporated. "Someone I used to know," she managed. "He looked at me funny." "I know, baby. Not bad funny. Just..." Her son searched for the word, his brow furrowing in concentration, as it always did when language couldn't quite capture what he was feeling. Like he was surprised, like he wasn't expecting to see me. "He wasn't..." "Did he know my dad?" The question landed in Vivian's chest, like a stone dropped into still water. She felt the impact, felt the ripples spreading outward through her body, felt her carefully maintained composure begin to fracture along fault lines she'd been reinforcing for nearly a decade. She turned to face her son, this boy, this beautiful, curious, endlessly patient child who had spent his entire life searching for a face to match the absence in his heart, who had asked strangers in grocery stores and parks and school hallways if they were his father, who had accepted every no with quiet dignity and carried the weight of that absence without complaint, without bitterness, without ever blaming her for the incompleteness he felt. He deserved the truth. He had always deserved it. "Baby, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully." He straightened in his seat, folded his hands in his lap, gave her his full attention with a solemnity that made him look older than 9, older than any child should ever have to look. "That man in the lobby, his name is Harrison Cross." The reaction was immediate. Her son's dark eyes widened, and she watched the connections form behind them. The last name on his backpack, the last name on his school enrollment forms, the last name his mother had given him that matched no one else in their small, carefully constructed family. "Cross, like our name?" "Yes, baby." Her voice broke on the word, splintering like wood under too much pressure. "Like our name." She told him, not everything. He was 9 years old, and the full weight of adult betrayal and heartbreak and the complicated geography of a love that had been destroyed by a mother's manipulation was too much for shoulders that still needed help reaching the top shelf. But she told him enough. Enough for the shape of the truth to be visible, even if the details remained soft. "He was going to marry me. A long time ago, before you were born, but something happened and he had to go away." "Did he know about me?" "No." "Why?" The hardest question, the question that had kept Vivian awake on countless nights, staring at the ceiling of whatever apartment she was renting at the time, turning the decision over and over in her mind like a stone she couldn't stop examining. Had she been right? Had she been wrong? Had she protected her son or punished his father? Had she been brave or afraid? She still didn't know, because I was angry and hurt, and I thought keeping you safe meant keeping you secret. Was I a secret? The smallness of his voice nearly undid her completely. "No." She reached across the console and pulled him close, wrapping her arms around his narrow shoulders, pressing her cheek against the top of his head where his dark hair smelled like the shampoo she bought in bulk at the drugstore. "You were never a secret. You were a treasure. My treasure. I was protecting you. Even if—" she swallowed hard. "Even if maybe I was also protecting myself." Her son was quiet for a long time. She held him and let the silence do its work. Let him process the information at his own pace, in his own way. He had always been this way, absorbing things deeply, turning them over internally, arriving at conclusions that often surprised her with their maturity. "Does he want to know me now?" "I think so." "Do you want him to?" Vivian pulled back so she could see her son's face. He was looking at her with an expression that was heartbreakingly familiar. Harrison's eyes, her stubborn jaw, a combination of two people who had once loved each other and created something that outlasted the destruction of everything else between them. "I want what's best for you, baby, even if it's hard for me." He nodded slowly, processing. Then his brow furrowed again, and she could see him working through something, assembling words carefully in ways he assembled his drawings, with precision and purpose. "Maybe," he said, and hesitated, "maybe we can find out together, if he's good or not." Despite everything, despite the decade of pain and the confrontation in the lobby and the fear that was still coursing through her veins like electricity, Vivian almost smiled. Almost, "Maybe we can." Her son reached for her hand and held it. Small fingers wrapped around her own, squeezing with a strength that went far beyond physical. They sat in the parking garage for another 10 minutes, mother and son, holding hands in the front seat of a car that wasn't moving, gathering the courage to drive toward whatever came next. Harrison drove back to Manhattan from the Connecticut estate in silence. No radio, no phone calls, no distractions from the detonation that had just occurred inside the framework of everything he'd believed about his own life. The highway stretched before him in the fading afternoon light, and he drove with the mechanical precision of a man whose body was functioning while his mind was somewhere else entirely, somewhere dark and airless, where the truth lived and demanded to be examined. His mother had faked a terminal illness. He kept turning the realization over, testing it from different angles, looking for some interpretation that didn't lead to the conclusion he'd already reached. But every angle confirmed the same devastating geometry. The timing of the diagnosis, the convenient urgency that had forced his hand, the miraculous recovery that had followed so neatly after Vivian was gone. The 9 years of social engagements and charity galas and perfect health that Genevieve had enjoyed while her son grieved a love he'd destroyed on her behalf. She had looked him in the eyes and told him she was dying, knowing it was a lie. She had watched him weep at her bedside, held his hand while he promised to honor her wishes, and felt nothing. Or perhaps she'd felt triumph, the satisfaction of a strategy executed flawlessly. She had let him carry the weight of that sacrifice for 9 years without once considering what it had cost him. What it had cost Vivian. What it had cost a boy who spent his childhood asking strangers if they were his father. When Harrison arrived at his penthouse, he sat in the car for 20 minutes before going inside. Then he did something he hadn't done in years. He made a decision that had nothing to do with the Cross family name or the company or the expectations of anyone other than himself. He called a lawyer, not the corporate attorneys who handled his business dealings, not the family lawyer who had managed Cross affairs for 3 generations, a different kind of attorney, the kind who specialized in investigations, in uncovering truths that people had worked very hard to bury. "I need medical records," Harrison said when the call connected. "Everything. Diagnosis, treatment, billing. I need to know if my mother was actually dying 9 years ago, or if she lied about the entire thing." There was a pause on the other end. Professional, careful. "Mr. Cross, obtaining someone's medical records without their consent is... I don't care what it takes. I don't care what it costs. I need the truth." 3 weeks later, Harrison sat in his lawyer's office with a file folder thick enough to tell a story he wished didn't exist. Inside were medical records he'd had to subpoena. His own mother's medical records, obtained through legal channels that felt both necessary and grotesque. Inside were billing statements from facilities that turned out to be luxury spas rather than cancer treatment centers. Inside were receipts for consultations with concierge physicians whose specialty was not oncology but executive wellness programs, the kind that catered to Manhattan's elite who wanted vitamin infusions and preventative care wrapped in the language of medical necessity. The private investigator's report was clinical in its precision. Genevieve Cross had never received chemotherapy, had never undergone radiation, had never been treated by an oncologist at any of the major cancer centers she'd claimed were managing her case. The treatments she'd referenced in hushed, brave tones were spa visits, massage therapy, acupuncture sessions billed through a medical practice that specialized in making self-care look like serious intervention. She had lied about dying, systematically, completely, with enough attention to detail that Harrison had believed her for 9 years without question. The evidence sat in his lawyer's office like an accusation he couldn't escape. His attorney looked at him with an expression that managed to be both sympathetic and professionally neutral, waiting for instructions on what to do with information that could destroy what remained of the Cross family reputation if it ever became public. "What do you want to do with this?" the lawyer asked. Harrison stared at the folder, at the proof that his mother had destroyed his life with a calculated lie, at the documentation that would, if he chose to use it, expose Genevieve Cross as someone who had manipulated her own son's grief for her own purposes. He could go public. He could release the records to the press. He could watch his mother's carefully cultivated reputation crumble under the weight of her own deception. But what would that accomplish? It wouldn't bring back the 9 years he'd lost. It wouldn't undo the damage. It wouldn't give him back the life he should have had with Vivian, or the childhood he should have shared with his son. "I need to see her," Harrison said finally. One more time. He drove to Connecticut alone, the same route he'd taken weeks earlier when he'd first confronted his mother about her knowledge of his son. But this time was different. This time, he carried proof. This time there would be no performance, no plausible deniability, no emerald rings twisting while Genevieve calculated her next deflection. The estate looked smaller somehow. Or perhaps Harrison had simply stopped seeing it through the lens of obligation and legacy and started seeing it for what it actually was: a very expensive prison his mother had built around herself, furnished with roses and antiques and the accumulated weight of generations who had confused wealth with worth. Genevieve was in the garden. Of course she was. Harrison wondered if she'd moved from that white wrought-iron chair in the past month, or if she simply returned to it whenever she sensed a confrontation approaching, positioning herself in the place where she felt most powerful. She looked up as he approached, and something in her expression told him she knew. She'd always been able to read him, had taught him to mask his emotions precisely because she was so skilled at detecting them. She saw the folder in his hands. She saw the set of his shoulders. She knew. Harrison. Her voice was measured, controlled. This is unexpected. He didn't sit down, didn't accept the implicit invitation to make this a conversation between equals. Instead, he stood before her chair and opened the folder, laying the documents on the garden table one by one. Medical records, billing statements, the investigator's findings, each page a small detonation of truth. You destroyed my life. Genevieve's hand moved toward her emerald ring, then stopped. Even she recognized that the familiar gesture would be an admission. I saved your legacy. You destroyed my life. His voice was quiet, quieter than when he'd shouted in this same garden weeks ago. The quietness made it more devastating, more final. And for what? For money I never wanted? For a legacy I never asked for? For the preservation of a family name that means absolutely nothing to me without the people who should have been part of it? That girl wasn't worthy of... Her name is Vivian. Harrison's voice cut through his mother's objection with surgical precision. And she's the mother of my son, the grandson you manipulated me out of meeting for 9 years, the child who spent his entire life asking strangers if they were his father because you couldn't stand the idea of me loving someone you didn't choose. Genevieve's mask finally cracked. Not completely. She was too practiced at control for a full collapse. But enough for Harrison to see what lay beneath. Not guilt, not remorse. Something closer to incomprehension. As if she genuinely couldn't understand why her son was choosing to destroy their relationship over something as insignificant as a woman and a child. I did what I thought was best, she said. So did I. Harrison gathered the documents back into the folder. His hands were steady. His voice was steady. Everything about him was steady because he had finally, after 43 years, stopped performing for the woman in front of him. I gave up the woman I loved because I thought my mother was dying. I thought I was honoring a final wish. I thought I was being a good son. I was wrong. And I'm done thinking what you thought was best. He walked away, across the flagstone patio, through the garden she'd cultivated with the same controlling precision she'd applied to his entire life. Past the roses that suddenly looked less like beauty and more like weapons, thorns wrapped in softness, designed to hurt anyone who got too close. He didn't look back. Behind him, Genevieve called his name. Once, twice, then silence. Harrison Cross had spent his entire life in his mother's orbit, moving through the world she'd designed for him, becoming the man she demanded he become, and in the span of a single walk across a garden, he stepped out of that orbit entirely. He would never return. The estate sale began that spring. Harrison donated most of the contents to museums and charity auctions. The antiques, the art, the accumulated treasures of 4 generations of Cross wealth. The property itself sold to a tech entrepreneur who planned to turn it into a wellness retreat, which felt appropriate in ways that almost made Harrison laugh. His mother's kingdom, built on manipulation and control, would become a place where people went to heal. He kept nothing. Not the furniture he'd grown up with, not the paintings that had hung in the entry hall since his grandfather's time, not even the photographs, though his lawyer carefully extracted him from any that showed him as a child, before he'd learned to perform. The only thing Harrison kept was the lesson, and the determination to build something different. He didn't expect forgiveness from Vivian. He knew better than to ask for it, because forgiveness wasn't something you demanded or negotiated for. It was something you earned slowly, through actions rather than words, through consistency rather than promises. But he could show up. That much, at least, was within his control. But first, he had to reach her. Harrison considered his options with the same careful deliberation he brought to major business decisions, and then he rejected every one of them. Lawyers would make it adversarial. His assistant would make it impersonal. A phone call would give her the opportunity to hang up before he finished a sentence, and an email would reduce the most important communication of his life to pixels on a screen. He wrote a letter, by hand, on paper he found in a desk drawer he rarely opened. using a pen that felt unfamiliar in his grip because Harrison Cross hadn't handwritten anything longer than a signature in years. His handwriting was rough, unpracticed, the letters uneven in ways that would have embarrassed him in any other context. But this wasn't a business communication. This wasn't a performance. This was the most honest thing he had written in his life, and he wanted it to look honest, imperfect, human, real. He started 3 times, crumpled the first 2 attempts because they sounded like apologies drafted by a public relations team. The 3rd attempt was raw, and he forced himself to keep writing without editing, without polishing, without transforming the words into something smoother and less vulnerable. He wrote, "Vivian, I know I have no right to ask for anything. I gave up that right 9 years ago when I stood in your doorway and chose my mother's lie over our future. I know that now. She lied to me about being ill, and I believed her because believing her was easier than fighting for you in ways I should have. That's not an excuse. It's a confession, but I'm asking anyway. Let me meet him. Let me explain. Not to justify what I did, because there is no justification, but to tell you the truth. All of it. Every part of the story I should have told you nearly a decade ago. Let me try to be someone worth knowing. Not the man who walked away. Not the heir who performed on command. Someone better. Someone who earns the right to sit across a table from the son I never knew I had. I understand if you say no. I'll understand if you never speak to me again. I've spent 9 years understanding that some losses are permanent, and I accept that this may be one of them. But please, give me the chance to fail you properly, face to face, with honesty instead of cowardice. Instead of running away, Harrison, he sealed the envelope, wrote her studio address on the front, the address from the magazine article he'd memorized without meaning to. And the next morning, he didn't send it through a courier service or mail it through the corporate postal system. He drove to her studio himself, parked across the street, and walked the envelope to the front door, where he slipped it through the mail slot with hands that trembled in ways they hadn't trembled since the night he'd proposed to her on the penthouse floor. Then he went back to his car and drove away. And waited. A day passed. Then 2, then 4. Harrison existed in a state of suspended animation, going through the motions of running his company while his mind circled endlessly around a mail slot in a studio door and a letter that might have been read or might have been thrown away unopened. He conducted meetings, signed documents, made decisions about property acquisitions and renovation budgets and quarterly projections. None of it felt real. All of it felt like a man performing the role of a CEO, while the actual person inside waited for a text message that might never come. On the 7th day, his phone buzzed. An unknown number. A single text. Saturday, coffee shop on Bell Street, 10 a.m. You get 1 hour. Harrison read the message 11 times. Then he put his phone down, walked to the window of his office on the 42nd floor, and pressed his forehead against the glass in ways he'd done in his penthouse the night before the meeting that changed everything. She'd said yes, not to him, not to forgiveness, not to reconciliation. She'd said yes to 1 hour in a coffee shop, and the conditions were clear in their brevity. This was a trial, not a reunion. A measured, controlled opportunity for Harrison to prove he was worth the risk of letting him near the child she'd spent 9 years protecting. 1 hour to begin making up for 9 years of absence. It wasn't enough. It would have to be everything.